Oh, hi, we're back. We're going to be continuing our discussion of building a character from without. In this segment, this third segment, we're going to be talking about religion. We're going to be talking about hobbies and distractions. We're going to be talking about characters' taste in books, in music, and we're also going to talk about your sexual habits, your sexual proclivities, and your appetites in that department. Okay, listen. Now, religion is, for at least some of us, a rather thorny issue. But the fact remains that in the life of any dramatic character, it needs to play a role. It can be great, it can be small. It really depends on the needs of the character and the script. In most cases, that's going to be laid out for you by the writer. Not always. It really depends. Okay, fine. If you're playing Joan of Arc, it's going to come into play. If you're playing Agnes of God, it's going to come into play. If you're playing, I don't know, if you're doing the remake of Shoes of the Fisherman, or I'm not sure, you're playing Gandhi. I mean, it really depends on who you're playing and whether religion is a strategic, important element in the characterization. If it is, obviously you're going to have to really address that. In some cases, it may not be. It may be quite the opposite. I mean, you might be playing an agnostic character, right? Who may or may not acknowledge the existence of a supreme being. Or you may be playing an atheist. That's fine too. The big question for me is you have to make some decisions as to why your character has that relationship with religion, why your character has that relationship with God, so to speak. With religion. Does my position on religion make me friends or enemies? Okay, maybe you're playing John Proctor in the Salem witchcraft trials play, right? The Crucible. Any choices that John Proctor makes with regards to religion bring him down on one side of the fence or the other, right? So he has friends and enemies on both sides. So you have to think about what those choices are. You need to think about what your upbringing was as a child. Was it religious? Was it not? What religion was it, right? Were you observant? Did you participate in rituals or did you avoid them? You're also going to have to think about what your mother and father, what your family, what your parents, what was their relationship with religion, because it's certainly going to overshadow yours. I would also suggest to you that just because your character is religious or a member of a religious order or a practicing religious person does not necessarily mean that they are a moral person. It does not necessarily mean that they're an ethical person. I know some people will take affront at that, but I think it's true. The funny thing about religion and dramatic characters is that you have to ask yourself, is this a genuine religious practice or is it a cover for something else? Often it is, right? You also need to think about how your religious position and religious feelings, one way or the other, bring you into conflict with the other characters in the story. Remember, again, this is drama. You're a dramatic character, so there is nothing hunky-dory about your life, right? There is no business as usual. You are, by definition, in some level of crisis, or you're about to be plunged into crisis. And how does religion and your attitudes about religion fit into that? One last thing here on hobbies and distractions. Sometimes you don't have any information whatsoever in terms of the script or the gibbons about your character's private proclivities in that regard. It's still important that you have something. When in doubt, you can borrow from your own personal activities. I mean, you don't always have to reinvent the wheel in every single thing you do as an actor. I mean, yes, great. It would be wonderful if you had all of that just rattled off in a highly original way. But often, and this is a casting thing too, often we have a lot in common with the characters that we're playing. More often than not, you do. So in many cases, some of your own personal hobbies might be totally appropriate for the character you're playing. But you just have to think about it and make sure that it fits in with the givens, that it fits in with the pieces of the puzzle that are already in place, right? You don't want to pick up this. You also need to think about, when we're talking about books, music, yes, books even more so. How do I use my literary knowledge? Do I like to show it off? Do I have particular quotes from favorite books or scripture that I like to throw around? And then we were talking about religion a little while ago. How many people do you know that love to throw scripture out, right, to make a point, to make an exclamation, indelible, italicized, underlined point, right? There's nothing like spitting out words from Yahweh or Christ or the Archangel Michael or I don't know, Jehovah, whoever you want to quote, right? Because those words have power. Those words have weight. So think about what you've read. Think about who you've read. Think about ways that you can use it. You can use it as leverage. You can use it to amuse people. You can use it to intimidate people. You can do a lot with it. Listen. All dramatic characters have sexual desire, okay? Regardless of their age, regardless of their gender, regardless of their severity of their beauty or the lack thereof, regardless of their religious instruction, regardless of their moral center or the lack of a moral center, all dramatic characters have sexual desire. The big question is how and when they act on it. You also have to think about how my character's sexuality kind of comes together in terms of their other roles, right? Their official capacities, their jobs, their titles, their age. Does my character have a religious function, an official function? Am I a member of the ruling class? Am I an elite? Do I have some function that really limits my choices in terms of, my sexual appetites? And can I be open about what I like, or do I have to engage in secret behavior? And if so, where and when and with who? I think also when you're piecing together your character's sexual palette, so to speak, you need to consider formative experiences. You need to consider your childhood. You need to consider what they may or may not have been exposed to as a child at formative years, and how that might affect their choices now, their behavior now. Was there abuse? If so, what, where, and when? Again, and by whom? And is that abuse something that gets replicated in some sort of pattern by your character as an adult? Which we know, people do. People who are victims of abuse often reenact the abusive behavior, but from a position of control. A couple of more things to think about before we close on the subject of your character's sexuality. I want you to think about your role model growing up and what was their sexual behavior like, and how much of that have you adopted into your own behavior. I would think about what are your sexual impulses towards other characters in the play, right? What other characters in this piece have you had sex with? Some of them, none of them, one of them, two of them. I would also say, how was it? Right? If you did have sex with another character in the play or the film you're working in, was it good? Was it great? Was it bad? Was it awful? Was it just like, eh? And why? Okay, so in the next segment of building a character from without, we'll talk about a few more things. We'll talk about complexes. We'll talk about disappointments. We'll talk about ambitions. We'll talk about fears. We'll talk about phobias. And my personal favorite, obsessions. All right. I hope you're enjoying this. If you want to know more about the work we do, you can always look us up. We're on the web under 12stepmethod.com. See you later.